This is Kevin O'Keefe for Real Lawyers Have Blogs, of all things. And who am I talking with?
Tanya Forsheit. I'm the chair of the Frankfurt Kernet Klein & Sells Privacy and Data Security Group.
And I first talked to you when you called one evening and said, this is Tanya Forsheit from Proskauer, and I'm going to do a privacy blog.
Yes.
How did that come about? I mean, in your mind?
It was a really long time ago. I think that was in 2006 or something like that. I was like a senior associate, and I was trying to develop privacy practice at a time when privacy was really not
That's right.
so well known as a legal practice. We had breach notification laws, and in California we had some other laws, CalAPA and things like that, but wasn't that well known. And so I had an idea, as a senior associate at a large law firm. The idea was, how do I make people aware of my expertise and my knowledge and that I'm doing this. And blogging was around already, for sure. There were some law firms that already had, some large law firms that already had blogs. And
there weren't many.
There weren't many. There were a few. And I had, through that, doing some research, had discovered your company that was helping law firms do blogs specifically. And so I think that the idea had first come from even like a business development class I was doing, that maybe blogging was a good idea. And so I thought, well, let's give it a shot. Let me get some information. The firm was open to me finding out what would be involved. And then we had to make the case for it. But yes, that was how it happened.
So when you saw the privacy, you saw it as an opportunity.
I did.
Yeah.
I mean, certainly no one could have predicted what has happened.
Sure.
Because at that time, remember, there wasn't even really Facebook. Facebook was still sort of like a Harvard thing. And social media hadn't exploded the way that it eventually did, and we hadn't had many of the large breaches that have attracted attention from the C-suite and boards, and created the kind of, the public consciousness of this has changed completely. And then over the last few years, with things like the Edward Snowden revelations and Facebook, Cambridge Analytica. I mean, everything has changed.
You picked well.
I picked well, but I didn't. But it wasn't known, and there was a lot of skepticism. There was a lot of skepticism in the legal community about privacy as a legal practice, for sure. So this was a way to get more visibility.
Because one of the things I tell lawyers now is, rather than just say, okay, I'm in this practice group, and we're struggling, and I've got huge competition, so I'll start a blog and everything will be better in my life. That doesn't really work out that way. You're better off to sit back and say, where might the opportunities be in certain niches?
Right. And to be honest with you, the big thing that was even more important came not long after I started the Proskauer blog. I decided to go out on my own and start my own firm called Info Law Group, which is still around as well. And blogging, that started in 2009. Blogging was at the absolute core and heart of what we were doing in launching that firm, because that was how we were putting out our knowledge base about lots of things: privacy issues, data security, cloud computing, which was really big and growing at the time. We did a whole series of blog posts on cloud computing that got huge response. I mean, even to this day, I think some of those 10-year-old blog posts are floating around.
Who was the driving force in saying, okay, we're going to blog and we're going to build notoriety through blogging?
In that situation, it was both myself and Dave Nevada, who was one of my co-founding partners, who's now at Cooley, and who's also a big blog. He was a blogger even before. I mean, I think even before we started the firm, he had his own blog and was doing a lot there.
And what I remember about that site was it led with the content. So it wasn't like, okay, here's everything our firm does, here's the pictures of who we are, here's where we went to school.
Right.
You led with your insight and commentary.
At that time, we wanted the blog to be the website.
Be the site.
And obviously over time, there are different philosophies about how that works or doesn't work. I think today things are different to some extent, but at the time it was very, it worked well, because that was how people got to know us. And I mean, I still run into lawyers and other people these days who will know me through that, right? And that's kind of, it's neat that we were able to develop a brand. I mean, truly a brand and a reputation through that.
What have you learned from from blogging? I mean, what is it? I mean, maybe even better question. What has it done for you? I mean, you just said brand. But
Yeah, branding.
As you look back on it over the years, you're going back a while.
Right. It has so in each law firm where I've done in each law firm I've been at. I did it at ProsGauer, did it at InfoLaw Group, did it at Baker Hostetler when I was there, and we're doing it here now, although, and I've already said, big caveat, for those who are going to go to our blog, which is Focus on the Data. We don't blog as often as we'd like to, but that's because we're so busy.
You're not the only ones that's happened to, or you already were.
Right, and with the California Consumer Privacy Act, so the biggest thing it's done for me is you build your brand, and my brand is built not just associated with the firms I've been with, but for me, right, which is surprising and interesting, but I've become known individually through it as well, because I've been willing to go out and write things that are not necessarily always the kind of like lawyerly, like, oh, I'm writing a sort of a scholarly article,
right,
or I'm just writing like a little blurb. It's something in between where I really am sharing some knowledge. I'm not giving legal advice, right, but I'm sharing some knowledge that is unique to my perspective and based on my experience in the industry, et cetera. And that's had huge, returns over time. I think it's not just individual. It's rarely just like, oh, I wrote this article and then somebody saw it and called up. And, I mean, that happens sometimes, but more often it's the collective of somebody's, looking for a person with particular expertise, goes online, does their searching, and all of that comes up, all those old blog posts, right, and word of mouth, et cetera. It just sort of adds to that reputational. And so one of the reasons why I'm so busy today, fast forward from 2006 to 2019.
Jeff Nowak from, he's now at Lidler, blogs on FMLA. He kind of basically said the same thing. It elevated him to a trusted advisor status. It took time. It wasn't like it happened, somebody clicked a button and said, I saw your post, I'm calling you up.
Right.
But he also said what you said too. He used the term helping people. Right. You shared some knowledge that people could find of help. How much, when you were blogging, ProsGauer, and then coming on with the InfoLaw Group, when you were hitting your stride blogging, how much time were you spending on it?
It really varied. I mean, so I'm sure there were points in time when I was spending a tremendous amount of time on it, but usually what would happen, because I think back to the times when there was a really good post, and usually what would happen was you just sort of get inspired by something, right? Like you would with any writing. And I like to write. I mean, that's another thing, is like if you don't like to write,
it's kind of tough.
You're probably not going to like blogging, but if you like to write, so that will happen to me. I'll get inspired by something and I'll want to write about it. And so it's just sitting down and putting pen to paper, and then those would just flow, right? So sometimes it would take a couple of hours, sometimes it might take longer.
Right.
But that wasn't just me, that was my colleagues, right? And I've had that experience even here where something has happened, like good example I can give you here. My partner Jeremy Goldman, who's a litigator here, but he does some privacy stuff as well, and he does like kids privacy, COPPA. So I don't know, 2 years ago, the show Silicon Valley had an episode about COPPA, and it was actually much more legal focused and it's hilarious. It's a hilarious episode of the show. So Jeremy was inspired by that, and he sat down that night, I think he did it overnight, and wrote a post about the Silicon Valley episode about COPPA, and what was accurate, what wasn't, what was, and so that happened. So you spend a couple hours and you crank out something really good. I don't think that good blogging should take, more than a couple of hours at most to have something solid. You don't want it to be super long and crazy. I mean, occasionally it's nice to have a really meaty post, and we used to talk about that at InfoLaw Group. Like we would do short ones and then we'd do something really longer. But no, I mean, you could do something in an hour if you really wanted to. So an hour or two a week is probably something ideal, I think, for people, maybe more for people who are really
and you think about what that accomplishes in building a brand. It doesn't have to be. I was talking with Amy Howe from SCOTUS blog on Monday. I mean, you realize 100 people have contributed to that blog this year. She's down at the Supreme Court in the morning before we met. I mean, that's a totally different deal.
Yeah, that was actually one of the ones that was like, I mean, I still think of that as like one of the very best, right? There's the SCOTUS blog, there's like Eric Goldman's technology marketing law blog, which I love, and those people, I mean, they're the ones who are really at the top of their game. And I've done like guest posts for Eric also, like that's the other nice thing now. Although I should do more on my own blog, but yes.
Yeah, really. Eric moved from Marquette to Santa Clara on the back of that blog because I met him that way.
Right? No, he has one of the very best. I mean, there's no question, and people use it as a resource. I mean, lots of lawyers.
You've mentioned some things already, but if you were talking to a lawyer that was on the fence about starting a blog or not starting a blog, you're talking about the time. You're talking about writing. Right. Although I started a blog because I was in a non-compete and I wanted to learn to write better. After having practiced law for 20 years, I thought I could write like a person, and this would be a good way to a good way to practice. Right. Here, we can even put that under here. Yeah. So I concluded that you can write bad, but for only so long after you blog. But what other advice would you give somebody if they were on the fence about thinking about doing it?
I think you do need to be committed to it. Right? It's problematic if you're going to do a blog and you're never going to do it. That is and I continue to struggle with that to this day. We're going to do. You have to be committed that you're going to keep doing it and keep blogging. If you're on the fence, if you feel like you have something to say and to add to a conversation about a particular legal topic that's unique, especially you're trying to sort of establish yourself in a niche space, it's a really good way to do that because it does raise that visibility through not a whole lot of effort, especially if you like to write, right? And you can write about things that you're already working on. Not obviously things that are privileged that you can't disclose, but you can write about topics that you're working on or something that you might otherwise need to do. There is such a thing as repurposing, which doesn't mean that you should, write something and then post it everywhere. It means, maybe you're doing a presentation and that something goes hand in hand with that and it all kind of comes together. And then, once you have all this kind of content, you really can use that in other contexts. You can do presentations, you can use it in your own client work.
What about the importance of a niche?
It is important because if you're just writing about the same things that everybody is writing about, then it doesn't matter, right? And so, which is one of the reasons why ours was successful early on, both with ProScout and InfoLaw Group, writing about stuff that wasn't being covered as much at the time. I mean, now I don't know how many privacy and data security blogs there are out there.
Lot.
There are many.
When ProScouters got busy, everybody else got real busy blogging.
Everybody has a privacy blog, but. If you're writing not just topics that are unique, but if you're bringing a different perspective to it, right? Especially if you're willing to sort of be not so lawyerly, and by that I don't mean like say things that wouldn't be appropriate for a lawyer to say. What I mean is don't talk about it the way any other lawyer would talk about it. Be yourself, have your own voice. I think when people talk about both blogging and social media, this is true not just in legal. If you don't have your own unique voice, you're going to be boring and you're going to be, it's either it comes off as advertising or it comes off as just, a news flash that everyone's already seen before, a headline. You have to have a sense of humor. You have to bring something unique to it that's going to draw people.
How did you figure this all out? Maybe it was just over the years. You learned by the seat of your pants. Because you could go out and teach a course now.
I figured it out because I had to.
Yeah,
because I really wanted to have a successful practice. Yeah. And I had come out of being a general commercial litigator, which I enjoyed. I really did. But I didn't see an ability to turn that into a practice of my own that was unique to me, and I was lucky to be in a place where privacy was an option and there were other people I was practicing with. I was lucky that the blog had also come out, I should say, at ProScout had come out of a book, a treatise. We had done a ProScout on privacy treatise through PLI that Chris Wolf, who at the time was at ProScout, then went on to Hogan, had done. And so the blog was sort of a jumping off point from that. It could be a continuation of, because a book you can only update so often, right? And then you've got this book that has to be, paper has to be inserted. Blog you can keep much more current and you can have topics that are much more timely, right?
There aren't pocket parts anymore.
Exactly. No, there still are, I think.
How did you get the other people in ProScout? Because it sounds like you kind of had this idea. Yeah. The firm says, okay, you can explore it.
Right.
But other people jumped in that at ProScout.
They did.
How did that all come about? Because usually you're not going to have the associate
Right. So
get the free reins to do that, and then bring everybody else in.
Sure. Well, for one thing, I was pretty senior, even though I was an associate, and I was, to the firm's credit, I was somebody who they treated very well, and they had a lot of regard for, and so they gave me that. I certainly had to prove that this was something that was worthwhile. But then once we did that, there were a group of associates, and we didn't really. We had a privacy group, but there weren't that many people who were really technically privacy. There were litigators, there were corporate people, and so all of us kind of were just wanting to be involved because you get your name out there. At that time, that was very appealing. As a way for a more junior person to become known as associated with something, and you Google yourself and your name shows up, and if you do that,
no, it
right?
is kind of amazing.
And you get, suddenly you get news alerts about stuff that, and especially, the other thing that happens is that journalists, as you know, pick up on this stuff,
Yep.
right? So you get journalists who will want to take your content and do something with it. You also get people who will call you for interviews about
That's
something.
right.
You become sort of a quoted expert, right?
Right.
So if you're an associate, that's an opportunity
You bet.
that's different from, I'm just going to write this brief and someone else is going to take credit for it and have their name on it, right? One of the very deliberate decisions we made at Proskauer and then also at the other firms I've been at is the blog posts are in the name of the person, right? Some firms have decided to just say, by Proskauer or by
Right.
Frank Kerner, whatever, which is fine. There's another way to do it.
It doesn't work very well.
I'm not going to judge. But when we started each of these, we were blogging in our own name. And as I've left some firms, in the interest of full disclosure, sometimes, and this is not surprising,
Right.
and I don't blame anybody because those are firm blogs, right? So sometimes my name has become a firm name, which is fine. I'm still very proud of that content. I still consider it to be
Right.
content that I created, and I'm very happy about that. But that's how you got people involved. Of course, when people are busy, it's very hard to
Right.
get people to continue that momentum. I have found even here today, even when we're super busy, if there's an associate who really wants to write about a particular topic, you cannot stop that person. It doesn't matter how much they have to do billable work. They will find a way to do it in the middle of the night because they want to get that out and they want to make that statement, right? So.
Yeah, it's still, after all these years, it still works.
It does. It does. It's fascinating. It is, yeah.
And really, publishing always worked. If we probably look back long before we were
Right.
lawyers,
Right.
150 years before, what did lawyers do? They
Right.
probably spoke, they were interviewed, they wrote.
They wrote. Absolutely.
And we're just doing it digitally
Right.
today.
Well, the thing that I love it and it drives me crazy is when I'm sitting in a meeting, it could be here, it could be out in the bar association world or something, right? And somebody goes, we are going to blog. Like no one has ever thought of this before. Blogging. And it's like, yes, blogging, right? Of course. But you're right. It's just as effective and just as compelling now. And that's why people are still like, wow, Lightbulb.
You need to have an individual, though, that becomes the driving force
Yeah.
with a little bit of energy. Because
Yeah.
sometimes firms will say, we have to have a blog. And if I asked them what the goal is to have a blog. That's really not a good enough goal.
No.
What's going to measure success? Well,
Right.
we'll have a blog.
Right.
And then it tends to die out because nobody's passionate about it.
Right.
I still think passion is real important.
Yes.
There must have been some passion that you had for privacy law back then.
Yeah, well,
and still do.
For sure, I still do. I think then I was intrigued by it, right? And I wondered what the possibilities were. It had some interesting relationships to other things I had done and enjoyed on the intellectual property side, even on the traditional property side, right? And so I wouldn't have imagined that it would have been as high profile of a practice as it turned out to be, which is a surprising thing.
But you must have had some moments when all of a sudden this stuff started breaking and you go, holy cow.
Yeah, no, for sure. Absolutely. Yeah, no, it's been fun to sort of watch the rest of the world catch up, and then to also have people who consider themselves to be, old timers in the privacy world who have only been doing it for, say, 5 years, right? There are people, believe it or not, and I'm not even the most senior of them by a long shot. There are people who've been doing privacy now for maybe even 20 years, meaningfully. A lot of them in DC, where it was something that started a little earlier. And those are the real pioneers. But I mean, yeah, the blogging is something that allowed me and many others to have a voice.
Well, I think at this point in time you're looked at as one of the leading lawyers,
yes,
even in the country.
Shockingly, but apparently, yes. And since California has decided to, stick its neck out there and lead the charge, it's been an even more kind of strange journey and experience. But yeah, so this is all one of those reasons. Certainly my name would not have been known without the blogging.
Yeah, because I'm sitting here today, and we're sitting in Century City, California,
yes.
And I'm assuming you have a lot of clients. You built a book of business.
Yes, over many years, and
faster than you probably think.
Actually, I mean, in the grand scheme of things, I think it has been faster. Also, because things move much more quickly these days than they used to. But it's still I think your point earlier that it takes time, right? People can't expect that these things are going to happen overnight. But that's what's rewarding about it is when they do happen, right? So I've had people that I've known in my legal world for 20 years who, maybe I knew them in some capacity when I was a mid-level associate somewhere, and now today those people are my clients and coming to me because they think of me as a leading expert in privacy. And could I have ever seen that evolution happening? No, not at all, right? There's just no way that would.
And at the speed.
At the speed of it, right, in 10 or 15 years to go from nobody.
That's why I talk to people. I said,
nobody.
I had to join the State Trial Lawyers Association, then nationally get on the board of these things,
right.
And I still wasn't there.
And
now people are doing it with publishing, and people might say, well, 2 years is a long time, and I'm thinking that's really relative.
It is very fast, right? Yeah.
One question, we don't have to connect it to everything else, but. Yeah. If I don't ask you the question, my product guy will get upset. Okay. What was the problem that LexBlog solved for you as to why you even reached out and called me?
Oh, well,
because you could have done a blogger blog.
Oh yeah. But so I was a very typical big firm lawyer in many ways, right? And it was like, I want to start a blog. I'm a lawyer. What do I do? I probably Googled it and remember. Actually, you know what? I probably had seen like an article or something because I think you were already getting press. I think LexBlog was getting a lot of press at the time because it was catering to lawyers and law firms. And there were some big firms who were using you guys. So I think that's where, because I knew that if I went to management and said, look, there are these other big firms who are using this as a platform, right? It wasn't just some random thing where I was going to spin up my own, WordPress or something. That was why. I mean, it was designed and it was customized for lawyers and especially people who weren't necessarily that savvy about how to do it.
Yeah, because when it started, I think it was Rob Kahn, and he was at Fenwick and may still be. He invites me to speak at a conference. All these people are asking me questions about blogs, and he's announcing me as the national leader in blogs for lawyers, and I have a TypePad blog. It cost me $4 a month for about 60 days. I thought it was all very funny.
Right.
And so then I go down to Tim Stanley's place, and Tim and his wife Stacy had started FindLaw, and I said, can you do blogs for lawyers? These people, he goes, well, they're free. And I said, I'm a lawyer and I had a firm. I would be scared to death to do this. In fact, I'm really scared that they're already finding my silly blog and it looks bad and I don't know what to do. So that's, truth be told, that's how the company started. I thought that lawyers are professionals. They didn't want to look lame. They didn't want to do anything stupid, and they need to just relax about the process.
Absolutely. No, I think it did. Even if some of the things that were being done were relatively straightforward, having that as a platform to work off of, right, where you basically you're logging in, or you're not even necessarily logging in, right? If you're in a law firm and you're a partner, you're drafting something in a Word document, and then either your assistant or the associate or somebody is
logs
going
in,
into
publishes
this,
it,
and it's so user friendly, et cetera, and it's gotten obviously even more so over the years, and yeah, I mean, it's great. I mean, everyone here these days now, the lawyers themselves, they know exactly what to do, right? You don't have to explain to them in great detail.
Well, it's kind of like when word processing came to me. I practiced law before there was word processing.
Right. No, now it's very intuitive for them.
Yeah, I can tell somebody, it's just a WordPress platform. Oh, that's easy done.
Right, exactly. Yes.
Well, thank you very much. This was delightful.
Oh, thank you. Appreciate it.